Well, hello everyone. Welcome back. We are here with another video, and today we're going to be talking about muzzle loaders, specifically my Traditions Kentucky muzzle loader, Kentucky Deluxe to be technically correct. So, I haven't had a muzzle loader since I was about 18 years old. I've been into the percussion black powder guns, the pistols for quite a long time, but rifles have just sort of evaded me as far as interest goes, mostly because I'm a bit of a purist. And I've been holding out in my heart for a Pedersoli 1861 Springfield. Because, man, that's the rifle. If you're going to go black powder rifle, I just feel like that's peak, And so, there's other options out there. There's all sorts of flintlocks, and, obviously the Hawken is very popular, and, lots of recommendations people have, but nothing's really grabbed me. And I'll be honest with you, it's a visual thing. A lot of the more affordable black powder rifles or muzzle loaders, whatever you want to call them, they just don't call my name. They look a little goofy. They look a little cheap. But, man, for whatever reason, the Traditions Kentucky Deluxe just kind of grabbed me. It kind of has that very early 1800s look, but it's also not flintlock. That's something I really am not interested in. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm a percussion guy. I don't see myself getting into flintlock anytime soon, mostly just because, I don't know, man, the percussion stuff is just a lot more reliable, and if you can load it right, you have less things that can go wrong. You have a more immediate shot when you break the trigger. On and on you could go. So anyway, the Traditions kind of grabbed me, and I was like, okay, let me look into this. And of course, it's not a super historical gun, but at kind of the 10-foot view, it has that look. It doesn't look like the Hawken, and I know a lot of people have the Hawken. I just don't like the way they look. I don't know what it is. They just look goofy to me. This one, though, has the wood that goes all the way to the end. The stock, is full length. You got a lot of brass appointments. And it has that sort of infantry rifle look. And, man, they look good, right? There's 3 rules, and, I get this from the guitar world. There's 3 rules on how you pick a guitar, right? How it looks, and how it looks. That's not exactly true, but there's a lot of truth to it. And that really is the case. When you start getting into older guns, it has to look right. It can't be goofy. So I got the Traditions rifle, got it in, and I actually recorded a video a while ago when I first got it in, but I actually deleted that video because I just felt like, I've got to run this rifle for a while. I need to go stomp around with it. I need to shoot it, do some testing and just see what it likes, how accurate is it, wear it in a little bit. And now I'm at about 80 rounds through the gun. And I feel like now I have enough information about the gun, and I've kind of, I've learned the rifle enough to talk about it with a little more credibility. Now, as you can see, it's not on the table for one simple reason. It's like 5 feet long. So I'm not even going to attempt to do that. We're going to be, putting it up on screen quite a lot. But I want to talk about kind of the kit I've built around the rifle as well. So that's what we have on the table. And then, of course, the Colt's just here to be gorgeous. That's its job right now. So let's talk about the rifle. As I said, it's a Traditions, which is a brand that's, kind of hit and miss in my opinion. Not everything from them is great. A lot of it's very cheap and gimmicky. But, so far this rifle has not been that way. But it's a Traditions Kentucky Deluxe. And the only thing that makes it deluxe is that it has a patch box, a brass patch box laid into the stock. Which, I'll be honest, I purely got that for looks. At this point, that patch box can't even be utilized because of the leather wrap I put on the stock, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it's a beautiful rifle. It has beautiful appointments. And just out of the box, I will say the rifle was really well built. The screws were all clocked the same direction. The internals were impressive. The trigger group just looked really sharp and well done. But particularly, I got to say that the hammer group or the hammer mechanism is of higher quality than my Remington 870's trigger group. That's the only thing I can compare it to that's like, has that sort of like group system that you can pull out. It's just really well done. It's there's nothing that looks cheap or flimsy or thin. There's no like ugly machine marks or casting marks. Everything just looks very well done. And overall, I have to say that about the rifle. The whole thing looks like somebody who takes pride in their work put this rifle together. So the bluing on the barrel looks really good. It's very dark. It's very durable, I will also say. I don't know what type of bluing it is. I would guess it's probably the cheapest thing possible, but it holds up pretty well. The brass is very well done. It's not cheap brass. It's not super soft. It's good stuff. And the wood stock is really nice, actually. I was kind of worried about that because a lot of times with these rifles, you get a very crappy, almost like basswood feeling stock that's super soft. The stain is usually very orange and bright and goofy. This is not that at all. It looks very well done. Now, where I wasn't happy with the rifle were a few things where, and look, this rifle was $580. I'm going to fault it where it was off, but I feel a little bad doing it because it's a really good rifle for the money. Let's start there. But where it is off was, first of all, the sights. The sights are dovetailed in, and my complaint with those is that they're extremely sharp. And I mean like literally cut my hands, ripped a hole in the shorts I was wearing when I pulled it out of the box. Like the sights are dramatically sharp. So I took a file, I knocked those edges down. It only took a few minutes, but it's one of those things where, man, I can just imagine carrying this through the woods. This would absolutely rip your hands wide open. I mean, it was razor sharp on the edges. You're also going to see by the pictures that the drum showed up just with like this very strange, like battery acid like corrosion. It took a few minutes with a nylon brush to get off, but again, just really weird that it would leave the factory that way. It's almost like they test fired this with some sort of cap or something. I don't know. I'm totally guessing here, but it was very, very strange to see that. Also, the inside of the patch box had a very strange corrosion going on in there. Again, nothing I couldn't clean up, but this part felt rushed. The stuff that matters, like even just in this picture here that you guys are seeing with that corrosion, look at the inlay of that patch box, the quality of the brass. I mean, it is seamless. It's very, very well done. So the stuff that matters is done right. Now, this is a little hard to spot, but on the front of the trigger guard, there was some really ugly brass welds. Inside of the stock looks great. I mean, it's a little rough cut in there, but nothing to complain about. Overall, the stock seems to be of good quality hardwood and really well done. Overall, you can see there, it's a very handsome rifle. It just looks serious. It looks really nice. Now, of course, this picture you're seeing is the day I got it, so the brass is very shiny. As of today, the brass is much more dull because I've shot it, I think I'm like 3 or 4 range sessions deep on this, and I have not made any attempts to keep the brass looking shiny. I'm letting it age. Overall, out of the box, the stuff that matters, that needs to be right, is right. I was very impressed with just the fit, the finish, the build quality of this rifle. Now, there are some things that I did change about the rifle very quickly, and you'll see in this next picture here that the stock is very old school. It is one of those sort of like arm wrap stocks. This is not a shoulder stock, very clearly. You will figure that out the first time you shoulder this rifle and pull the trigger. This point on the stock is brass, and it is extremely sharp. And it took one shot to literally cut my shoulder open. Not very much, but if I would have kept shooting, it would be a wound for sure. I took a Dremel tool, I knocked that down, and that helped a lot. But overall, what I was kind of unwilling to do was to modify the way I shoot for this rifle. I am a shoulder mount guy, right? I shoot rifles kind of one way, and I'm not going to do the weird arm thing and, blade and whatever. So the next thing I did was I made sort of a custom stock wrap. Now, I bought this stock wrap. It's a leather wrap on Amazon for like 25 bucks. It's very cheap. The leather is good enough, but overall it's very cheap. So it came with a bunch of foam. I immediately ripped the foam out of the inside of it. And then I took an old belt, just one that I got at a thrift store or something. And I had really been hanging on to for crafts such as this. And I cut the belt up and I sort of fashioned a little jig just to fill that crescent shape in the stock. And then I also put a piece of leather that goes up the back strap of the stock and then over the top. And then I cut 2 more pieces to fill in sort of the cheek portion of that wrap. And that's all glued together on the leather wrap. Nothing is glued to the gun itself. I use some super glue in some spots, and I actually use like bookbinding glue, which is good because it flexes. It doesn't dry really hard and brittle. And then I tied the wrap really tight, so even if the glue comes loose, that leather can't go anywhere. And what this did is it really made a nice flat stock on the rear of the gun. There's no crescent at all. It's very flat. It also helped with like the length of pull. It actually feels really nice for me to shoot. Now, another thing that I did to modify this rifle was related to the Ramrod. Now, the Ramrod it comes with, a lot of people complained about it being flimsy or things like that. I haven't felt that at all. My problem with this, and this is a very common complaint, and not even on just this rifle, I think this is a lot of rifles and a lot of brands. Essentially, there's a little metal bracket deep within the stock that applies friction against the Ramrod when it's stored in the rifle. And what happens is, as you shoot this thing, as you use it, you take it in and out, that loosens up. And there's a bunch of fixes out there, but all the fixes that I've seen involve really complicated fixes relating to that bracket. Everybody's focused on the bracket. And it also involves taking the gun apart, which I don't really want to do yet because there's a bunch of screws. You got to knock 2 pins out of the stock. You got to remove the barrel. It's an operation, right? I'm going to do that eventually, but for as long as I can, I don't want to really unmount the barrel more than I need to. So the fix I came up with, which you can see, is I glued a couple pieces of spruce, just real thin spruce. I kind of filleted off with my pocket knife and laid those on there, glued them on with wood glue, very little. And then I overlaid that with very watery, thin CA glue, a couple layers thick. That CA glue, it dries very hard and very quickly as well. And you can like sand this stuff and almost get a polish to it. And basically it's just a way at the end of the rifle to sort of increase the diameter of that ramrod so it sets in there real snug, and it worked perfectly. And the beautiful thing about this fix is, you know, if it's too tight, you can sand it off, right? Because it's glue on top of the wood. So I'm not going to be sanding wood that's then going to have to be replaced. It's actually hard CA glue. But if it starts to wear over time and loosen up, you literally just take a toothpick and just put a dab, like literally 1,000th thick at a time, of that CA glue back on the top, increases the diameter again, and you got some nice friction. So as of right now, the ramrod, you can't even pull it out just by grabbing the tip of the ramrod. You actually have to use your thumb at the base and sort of push up and slide it out. And that's the way I want it. I don't want that ramrod coming loose when I fire or when I'm walking through the woods and then you go to like turn and snap it on a branch or something. Like, that ramrod needs to be secure. And really, guys, I'm not doing like military drills with this rifle. This is really intended for, fun target shooting, but also this is going to be a hunting rifle. So the idea that I'm going to need to reload really fast is really not in the cards. So those are some of the mods I've done to really just like get the rifle feeling better, working better for me, a little more personalized. And overall, it's very comfortable now. I really like the way it feels and the way it runs. Now, when it comes to shooting the rifle, when I actually went out the first time, I started with 50 grains of Pyrodex RS. I didn't want to do anything crazy. The recommended load is like 70 grains, but I wanted to start a little light just to sort of like get my feel for the rifle, because again, it's been many years since I've had a muzzleloading rifle. Now, a pretty standard load for these is a .490 ball with a 10,000th thick patch, and that's what I started with, and that turned out to be very accurate. Now, this target that I'm going to show you was basically just me standing at 50 yards, and all the shots were on target. Very happy with that. When I actually went and got something to rest the rifle on and it was able to really focus on accuracy, the rounds are going exactly where you asked them to go. And that leads us into the next part, which is the trigger. So this thing has a dual trigger system, and essentially the front trigger is your main trigger, and the rear trigger is a set trigger. And what that allows you to do is the rear trigger, you pull that once the hammer is at full cock, and this drops the trigger weight, the main trigger weight, down to, I don't even know how, it feels like a couple ounces. It's extremely light, and that's a good thing. It allows you to be really accurate. As long as you're stable and those sights are pointed where you want the bullet to go, it's going there. Like, it was extremely accurate. So much so that, and I don't have this on video, I wish I did, but I had a friend out at the range with me, and she is a very short female, and she's never fired a muzzleloader before, let alone a very long 50 cal. This thing rifle's about as tall as she is. And I set her up with 75 grains of RS with just your standard patch and ball. And I showed her how to, employ that set trigger. So it's a very light trigger. And her first shot hit the dead dang center of a steel silhouette at 50 yards. And she was like, wow, that was super easy to hit with. And that really is true. This rifle, the sights are very nice. The trigger's great. Overall, just the overall feel, balance, and function of the rifle, it's effortless to be accurate with. And speaking of the sights, let's talk about those for a second. So the rear sight is just a standard sort of like, blocky rear sight. It's a little unimpressive, to be honest. But the real special part is the front sight. You have this brass blade, and man, when you're in sunlight or just outside in general, that thing pops. And it's very easy to get good hits with it. It's very easy to pick up with your eyes. I love the sights on this rifle, and as I said, they're dead on. I did not have to do any adjusting. If you do your job, it's going where you ask it to go. So after that first range session where I was just running 50 grains of powder, my next range session was I wanted to go up to 75 grains. Now, the recommended load is 70, but basically 3 charges with my powder flask that has a 25 grain spout. Easy math, right? I didn't really feel like it was necessary to drop it to 70. And again, first shots were just your standard .490 ball with a 10,000 patch. And no surprise, super accurate. And it definitely hits with more authority. Now, at this range, it was a different range. They actually have a really nice big steel silhouette. And steel is really nice because it gives you an idea of just how hard your rounds are hitting. And, we were out there shooting a lot of things that day, and you hear 9mm hit the steel and all sorts of things. But, man, when this 50 cal hits that steel, the steel screams back. It absolutely rings. So I don't really have any desire to really test out any more or less powder. I feel like 75 is very easy for me. It's something quick and easy I can use. It's working really well, and it's hitting really hard. Accuracy is good. Now, I did test out some 15 thousandths patches. I'm not so sure that increased the accuracy. It changed my point of impact to the right just a little bit. But I think I'm going to stick with the 10,000th patch just because I did notice with the 15 thousandths, I had a little bit of a hang fire about every other round, and I don't like that. I want fast ignition. Now, as the video is titled, this is, in my opinion, expert level woods walking gun. Now, I am not an expert. Let me just stop you right there if that's what you think I'm saying. But I'm really into the history of some of the early frontiersmen. Just stomped around this country, made a lot of discovery, worked with the natives, sometimes against them. I love that history. Guys like, John Coulter, Hugh Glass, Lewis and Clark, obviously. There's so many of these incredible guys. Now, I know they were using much different flintlocks and different designs, but this sort of like single shot old school rifle really is the expert's woods walking gun. And so what I wanted to do was almost combine some, I guess, infantry Civil War era doctrine with how to load this thing and how to carry some shot. I didn't want to just carry a bunch of loose components. I'm really big on cartridges. If you can get them to work, you got a good way to carry them. Man, I'm just such a fan of cartridges. And really, to me, that makes this a much more viable woods walking gun. Look, reloads, no matter what, with these rifles are slow. However, if you can grab something like this, which we're going to talk about in a minute, this is literally powder and ball in one thing. You plug this in the barrel, ram it down, cap, good to go. And I didn't get this on camera because my camera overheated, but I can get one of these loaded in about 15 seconds. Like, very, very quick to load these guys. So it increases the viability and really utility of this rifle being a woods walking gun when you set it up to have sort of some of those infantry style cartridges. Whereas if you're using, like, you know, a powder horn, and then you're carrying loose ball, and then you're filling up your patch box, that's certainly a very traditional way to do it. But I'm sort of approaching this from, again, that more like Civil War era, you know, paper cartridge route. And at this point, that's a good place to kind of get into sort of some of the loads I've used and how I'm carrying my stuff here. I'm basically using 75 grains of Pyrodex RS across the board. That's the only powder I'm using. That's the only charge I'm using going forward. I feel like that's a really good, you know, easy to achieve charge because, again, my powder flask, or one of my powder flasks, has a 25 grain spout. So it's really easy to just do 3 pours. I know what I got. And then if I'm using ball, I'm using .490 ball and 10 thousandths patches, which are pre-lubed patches. We'll talk about that in a minute. But then I have this other load. Now, this is something I'm still sort of like feeling out, testing. The reviews on these are very hit and miss, and people's end user experiences vary pretty widely on these. But essentially, these guys are the Lee REAL bullets, and hopefully you can sort of see the profile of the bullet. So this is the bottom of the bullet here. This is a 320 grain lead cast bullet, and these things, I call them hate pucks. They are just really angry little guys, and you're going to see in one of these videos here that these things slap steel really stinking hard. So essentially what these are, again, it's a 320 grain lead cast bullet. I cast these myself in my Lee mold. These are intended to be used a little bit different from the patch and ball. The way these work is they have these ribs, and essentially you're supposed to drive this bullet down into the rifling. The rifling is going to sort of cut its own grooves in the bullet, and then you ram it the rest of the way. Now, a lot of guys have had hit and miss sort of experience with these. Some guys say that once the rifling is cut into the grooves on this thing, that it can just slide out. The bullet will literally just slide out the bore of the barrel. That's not great. Other guys have had issues with these keyholing. Now, my experience is very limited. I've only shot about 6 of these so far just to test them, but I will say they were super accurate, and again, the steel, it just obliterates the steel. And you'll hear in this video, once again, just the sound of it hitting steel is impressive. Now, the way I have seen to remedy the issue, now I haven't personally had this issue, but I'm sort of trying to get ahead of it. The way I've seen to remedy this issue with potentially the bullet sliding back out of the bore is making a very much like a Civil War looking paper cartridge. So this is 75 grains of powder in here, and then the paper actually goes up over those ribs. And that is a solution that a lot of people have suggested from what I've seen is paper patching, right? Adding some paper around the bullet, and that seems to hold it snug. Well, with this system, you literally just stick this in the barrel, ram it down. I don't even need to tear the paper, and the ignition works great with this cartridge. So not super sold on these yet. Again, there's so much conflicting information. It makes me want to sort of lean away from using these. But man, this is really easy to just shove that cartridge down the bore and put a cap on. The reloads are super quick, and 320 grains is nothing to sneeze at all. Now, let's talk about my main charges and really what I carry in my bag for this. So what you're going to notice in my bag here is I carry no loose materials. I don't have loose powder. I don't have a bag of ball. I don't have loose patches. Essentially, the way I've set my kit up is, you know, everything's as pre-packed as I can get it. So I have my ball block. You'll see in some of the videos, what I'm doing is I'm placing my patch, setting a ball in there, pushing it down, and then I'm putting some boar butter on top. And what this allows me to do is just simply take the ball starter, get it started, and down the bore. And so I just I have pre-patched and lubed balls, and I've got 8 of them. I feel like to walk the woods, 8 shots of 50 cal is probably plenty. And then the next component, I made this very crude box out of some scrap wood, but my buddy Kyle, who made this beautiful work of art, is making me one of these boxes out of that same walnut, so it'll be really beautiful. But essentially, made in the sort of Civil War era way, I've got some fiberglass backing and then some canvas as a hinge. And basically, I've got 8 powder charges pre-packed. I put these little pigtails on the top of them so you can reach down in the bag, open the flap, and grab a powder charge. You can plop this right down in the barrel. Now, I tear the top off and actually dump the powder in a little bit and then shove it down, with a ball on top, just because I want to eliminate any chance of having a little bit of a hang fire or a fail to ignite. That does happen sometimes with cigarette paper. Maybe if you've got a little lubrication in the bore, you can have problems. So I do dump some loose powder down there first, then push the rest of the charge down there with the ball, and that has worked 100% of the time. About 50 rounds using these powder cartridges. So I've got 8 75 grain powder charges with 8 preloaded, patched and lubed balls. That gives me, pretty quick reloads. So with this system here, I'm cutting down on the amount of loose materials that I need to just haul around. It also allows me to keep everything in one bag. I don't have to carry a big old powder horn around. I don't have to carry a powder flask. Everything's right there. And then as far as capping, I just have my, good old little capper, which this thing sucks for percussion revolvers. It works famously for that rifle. It is really good for that rifle. Now, I have 14 caps loaded in this capper. I've got way more caps than I need. It's just to make sure, maybe I'm going to have to snap a cap on one charge several times to ignite it. I've got extra caps for that. Maybe if you drop one. So I've got a bunch of spare caps for whatever might happen there with that little system. Really, that's it. In the bag, I've got my little brass hammer, and then I've got, my nipple wrench, and then a small oak dowel, and that's really it. Now, I do have a tin of caps just in case, and I've put cotton in there so it stays quiet, right? It doesn't make a bunch of noise rattling around when you're walking. So really, my reload kit consists of a powder box with 8 75 grain charges, a ball block with pre-patched and lubed balls, a capper, and a ball starter. That gives me 8 shots. Pretty much good to go for, whatever might come up. And then here's the other thing too. Because the patches and balls are pre-lubed, the gun doesn't foul up really at all as you get through these 8 shots. I was amazed when I ran the first 8 with 75 grains. I looked down the board, just shined a flashlight down there. It's not nearly as dirty as you would think it would be. Now, after that, definitely, it starts to foul quite a bit. But I feel like, 8 shots is a really good number to where, your bore's staying clean, you're maintaining good accuracy. And really think about it. 8 shots walking the woods, that's a lot. I would say even for, a day or two, that's plenty of shot to have on hand. And you guys can just see down in my bag here, I still have plenty of room for whatever else I might need. Maybe if I want to carry a small thing of water and a bore brush, so if I need to clean the thing in the field, whatever the case may be. But this is it's a small bag, and intentionally I have tried to make this as light and quiet, low profile, low draw as possible. Make the reloads as easy and as quick as possible while maintaining that reliability of making sure you get good ignition. And that's really it. So what this allows me to do is, you know, throw something like this guy, the 1911, on my hip, grab the rifle. I got 8 rounds of 50 cal, 9 if you go out there preloaded. And like I said, guys, I've used, 50 of these powder cartridges so far, about 50, somewhere around there. And you'll see the picture here. That's my little kit where I, make these powder cartridges. Takes about 45 minutes to make 8 of them, tops. That's probably a little long. And they have worked famously. So overall, guys, I'm about 80 rounds deep, somewhere on there, maybe 70 rounds. I really like this rifle. It shoots true. It has been a joy to shoot. The trigger's great. The sights are very usable. It's a heavy rifle. It's a long rifle, but it's a very well balanced. It just feels very accurate. It's nice to sort of wield and walk around with. It feels substantial. And I will also say it's really easy to clean. You literally take off the screw on the drum, unscrew the nipple, stick a hose down the barrel, and let water run through it for 5 seconds, and maybe 10 patches down the barrel with a jag, the gun's clean, right? You season the barrel with boar butter or oil, whatever you like. These guns are very easy to clean. And I'm comparing this not to smokeless powder guns, but to percussion revolvers. Those guns are a nightmare to clean. They're terrible. So I'm really happy with this rifle, man. For $580, I couldn't be happier. I'm really impressed. Traditions is a brand that I've not really liked in the past because, a lot of their stuff's just really cheap and falls apart really easily, but I just don't feel that with this rifle. These are really well done, and besides some of the issues that I found with it, sort of just out of the box, it's been a great rifle and a joy to shoot and walk around with. So there you go. Now, this is video 1 of, I'm sure, more videos. I don't know, many, but in the future, I do plan on taking this up to my family's land in Georgia, taking a deer with it in the winter, and I'm really looking forward to that. So there you go, guys. That is the Traditions Kentucky Deluxe. Highly recommend this thing in my limited experience with it, but it's a good rifle. It's well built, and it's not just me saying that. There's a lot of good reviews on these guys. Really enjoying them, and for the money, it seems like a great way to get into this game. So there you go. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and I would love to hear. I know there's a lot of black powder shooters that subscribe to this channel. I'd love to hear what you guys are running, all your little tips and tricks. And I just got to say before we wrap it up, that's one of the great things that's really fun about black powder is everybody's so creative, and they come up with these neat little tools and tips and tricks and jigs, and just there's so many different ways to keep these guns running, to shoot them, to clean them, to maintain them. And I just love that. I know a guy who has percussion revolvers. I think he's got an 1860 Army. And he makes wads out of dryer lint. And then he makes his own, sort of like boar butter out of like a Crisco bacon grease concoction. He casts his own balls out of battery lead. He even makes his own caps out of match tip material and old Coke cans. It's so fun and so interesting to see how many ways people utilize these black powder guns. So anyway, if you got any of those, I'd love to hear them in the comments. And until next time, guys, we'll see you.